You ever wonder about the people in family photos, or ever try to ask who these people really were? Every face is a narrow escape or a love story that almost didn't happen. Your family stories are hidden in plain view. You just haven't accessed it yet. There are versions of these rebels and dreamers before life told them who they needed to be. And I'm not talking about the shiny stories everyone knows. I'm talking about the soul-crushing experiences with heartbreaks and real loss. You got to preserve these stories now. So contact the VietnamStoryBank.com today. No polish, just raw, recorded, beautiful history that makes you sit up and hold your breath. We dig it all up, record it, and hand it back to you. Safe, unerased, untouchable, and unforgettable. Don't let silence have the last word. Go to VietnamStoryBank.com today. Make sure your family's stories are recorded. I want to welcome everyone to the Vietnamese podcast. My co-host today is Nam Si Kim, who has been on the podcast many times, and we are actual partners with other projects outside of the Vietnamese podcast. Today we have two guests, very special guests, John Irwin and Robbie Parsley, both U.S. Marines that served during this really interesting time, as we'll get into, a period in Guam called Operation New Life. So welcome to the Vietnamese podcast, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So today we're going to kind of like get snapshots and stories of Operation New Life and what that period was like when the Vietnamese people were being lifted or were transferred out of Vietnam into Guam. And I'd love to get everybody's sort of initial stories on how they ended up, on this ship called the USS Kimbro, correct?
Yes.
John, you're the youngest man on this podcast, so I think we should start with you.
Boy, have you got your dates mixed up. Actually, what I remember, we were stationed at the Camp Hague in Okinawa. Camp Hague was an old post-World War II camp that the Army declared unfit for human habitation, supposedly in 1959, so they gave it to the Marine Corps and we occupied it. We were off the end of one of the runways at Kadena, so we could watch the jets take off in the morning. Whenever everything started going down, the initial was Operation Eagle Pull, the evacuation of Cambodia. So we knew something was going to happen. You could see in the Stars and Stripes and listen on the radio, Armed Forces radio service at that time. We had no TV, what was going on in Vietnam, but what we were hearing on the radio didn't jive quite with what we were seeing with the jets taking off of Kadena. Is that what you remember, Robbie?
Yeah. I was at Camp Hague teaching a driver's school.
Right.
Jeeps and deuce and a halves, and I had no clue what was going on until we were told to report back to our units. But we were watching the 4th Marines. They were dusting off pretty hard, and I knew it wasn't a float. I think there was already a battalion on the float, probably 9th Marines. And
right.
We just got the order to return to base. And
originally, General Houghton, which was the commanding general of the 3rd Marine Division, had designated 1st Battalion, 4th Marines to be the security forces going out. We had learned during Eagle Pull that you needed to have security forces on board these ships that were taking people out because they wanted to go where they wanted to go. Later, General Houghton directed that 10 detachments be formed, and the detachment that we were on, Detachment Echo, was formed from 12th Marines, which was an artillery unit. if I remember correctly, and Robbie, please jump in. I don't want to hog this, but the majority were from headquarters battery. The rest came from various batteries within the regiment, and it followed the age-old way of doing things in the military, where you send the people, you send your dead wood. So that's how we originally started.
Thanks, John. I think Nam had something to say.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add to what you were both describing and to clarify some dates. So Operation Eagle pulled. My understanding is this is mid-April, right, of 1975.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to contribute to the background as our story is unfolding, that's complemented by. Now, I was a year old, so I don't remember this. These are stories told to me by family, especially my parents. But right around that point, the writing was sort of on the wall for a lot of people in South Vietnam. And even prior to that, in the weeks prior to that, in areas further north, many of those cities already were starting to panic and they were seeing encroachment. And by that point in April, a lot of folks suspected that the North was coming to Saigon. That was sort of the last stand. Those weeks of April, towards the end, my parents were trying to figure out if they were leaving or not. And my father had the opportunity because he was a Korean national at the time and had credentials. He was working for the Korean embassy as a photojournalist. He could have evacuated all of us, the three of us. I was the only child at the time. The three of us with that embassy, but because my mother wasn't sure she wanted to leave her parents, her siblings, and all family members behind, she was kind of dragging her feet and didn't make a decision about it. And so we missed that chance. And by the time they wanted to leave, they were trying to go to the airport and all these other locations towards the end of April and were stopped. They were turned away at gunpoint. All kinds of things were preventing them from leaving until they got to the U.S. aid compound. And that's where people were not allowed in through the gates. But because of my dad's credentials, the three of us were able to enter the compound. And that's how we got to the Operation Frequent Wind Airlift. So this is the sort of precursor to what ends up happening out at sea, where all of us meet. Well, we don't meet, but our paths cross. Right? We evacuate by helicopter. It was a Huey off the top of that building. Get out to the airport. From there, we're waiting in darkness in the passageways as there's artillery and rockets coming in and hitting the airport. And then we board a larger helicopter that took us out to the coast. And we landed on the USS Midway. From there, I'm not sure how long we were on the Midway, but we are then transferred to the USS Truman Kimbro. And that's I'll let the two of you gentlemen pick up the story from there, because that's where we get to the ship, and you're already on the ship.
Yeah, I want to say it was the 17th when we flew out of Okinawa, landed in the Philippines. Then we were briefed in the Philippines and flown to the Coral Sea on what were they? I call them cods. Is that what they were?
That's
Greyhound. Yeah, that's an experience.
On board delivery cod.
Yeah, and over the next, I don't know, it didn't even 24 hours. We were on a mic boat almost. In that short amount of time, we didn't get hardly any sleep. But they were just moving us. And, next thing I know, we were up over the coast of Vietnam. And I was a Lance Corporal, so, I was the bottom of the food chain to know what was happening, how it was happening. But that's what I remember, just moving from here to here to here to as fast as they could get us there. And then we began training.
Kenneth, it may interest you. Originally, whenever we were formed up, we were on a 3-hour notice, so we had to be kept in a compound. All our equipment was there, weapons, everything. Then it went to a 24-hour standby. Almost immediately after that, the crap hit the fan, and we ended up, they brought in trucks. We got on the trucks when we got to Kadena Air Force Base. They already had the C-130s with the gate down. The engines were running. We got off the trucks onto the C-130s. They taxied out. We landed at Subic Bay, or Clark Air Force Base. I can't remember if it was Subic Bay or Clark Air Force Base, but as we were taxiing in, they lowered the gate and there were trucks following the aircraft. So we got off the aircraft onto the trucks, spent the night at Upper Mile Camp, then went on board the COD, Cargo On Board Delivery Aircraft, landed. They gave us breakfast. Then they put us on a helicopter to take us to a World War II destroyer that had no helo deck. So the way that we got on board that destroyer, the helicopter would hover. We took the horse collar, put it around us, put our packs and our weapons in front of us. They kicked us out and lowered us down on a destroyer that's doing 26 knots, not slowing down. Hit the deck and laid. I mean, you hit the deck, you don't try to stand up. You just lay down and let go and say, "Thank you, Lord, I made it." But that's how we got on board on those destroyers. We had lunch there,
John,
and then on their Mike boat.
John, I'm going to interrupt you. I want to probably go through the next hour with more about how you perceived the events. I'm less interested in the things that happened at this point, but I'm more interested in how you felt, like that emotional journey when you were going through all of this stuff. And what I mean by that is this. When we look back today, we can read about these facts. We can pick up pieces about all of these things, but what we cannot get is the human touch, the feelings of the U.S. Marines that were going through the moment. And I want this interview to be about that. Of course, you're going to sprinkle more details about the mission and how things, carried out. Right. But I'm really interested in your point of view today when you look back on those days and how you felt. And this is 50 years later, and I really want to go into your heart and your mind to hear you express how you felt at the time and how you felt today.
Basically, whenever it started, we didn't know what was going to happen because it was so confusing. We were originally briefed, or I was briefed, because I was communications. They had to keep us up with what was going on so that we had some idea of what we were going to do. Originally, we were going to Tonsanuk Airport and provide security at the receiving station there. Whenever Tonsanuk started receiving mortar fire and those last 2 Marines were killed, then our mission changed to go into Newport Pier, where we were going to provide security as the refugees came in. So now you're being told, or I was being told that we're going to go into an airport that's being mortared. Then we're going to a pier. So it was confusing and everything changed. You didn't have time to really have fear or to think about things because it was so fluid. After it changed to becoming a evacuation security force, you wonder what's going to happen. How are we going to get these refugees? How are we going to feed them? These are the minutiae that we had to go through. I'll let Robbie step in here because he can better tell you what he was feeling than I can.
No, I mean, it was mass confusion. It was chaos. When we got there, we trained. We had no clue what we were training for, fire suppression, riot control. feeding people. I don't even hardly remember anything about that even coming up. We were on sea rations because they didn't have enough supplies on the ship to feed us, much less water for, everybody to shower or drink. And when it started, 27th, 28th, I don't remember when it was. The first boat was small, and it was a relatively easy maneuver. It took us a while to get our feet wet, figure out, how to sanitize and search and what was allowed, what wasn't allowed. Like John talked about the trash can and the Zoom call, pistols, ammunition, grenades, whatever came out of people's bags just went in the trash can and over the side of the ship. And, from an emotional standpoint, I was 18 years old. I'd never experienced anything like that. You see the best and the worst of humanity all in one spot. I mean, we were
Robbie,
going.
Can I ask you about that
Sure.
best and the worst? Can you tell me stories of the worst and stories of the best? Like, what comes up in your mind when you're describing the best and the worst?
Well, when the people first started coming on, they were more affluent. You could tell by their dress, their manner. They were wealthier individuals. John said one was the mayor of Vung Tau, newspaper editors, journalists. But then, like when the barge Nam was on, pulled up, it was a shift in everything. That thing was packed. And we were sitting there looking over the side of that ship thinking, my God,
Wait, so are you saying that when Nam arrived, like that was the worst of the bunch there?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. Come on. No, but I mean, just the condition.
Yeah.
Let Nam tell you that the condition of that barge was horrific. And
Nam wasn't on the barge. You came on a bike boat.
Right. So just to be clear, my parents and I went on the barge. We witnessed. My father took pictures when the barge came and docked with the Kimbro. And this is part of the reason why we're all here today, because that photo that I had, I've seen that since I was a kid. It's tattooed in my head, right? These are one of the few photos we have being on the Kimbro. But as I was doing research to figure out what happened to the Kimbro and its history, I was online and I found other photos that were very, very similar, but they weren't taken by my dad. They were taken by John.
Actually, Bill Struble took those.
Yeah.
Oh, Bill did. Okay.
Bill did. Yeah.
But they ended up. I found them through your book and your memoir, and that's how we got connected.
After we got back to Okinawa, Bill had his film developed, and we got copies of it. I kept it in my book. Yep. Now, I've spoken with Joshua Nugent.
Joshua was.
I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Joshua gave me an article out of a paper that his uncle described what was going on that barge.
Yeah.
They were so packed. They were on there for 2 days. No water, no food, no sanitation. To sleep, they squatted in place.
Yeah.
The pictures of the barge shows, I mean, it's unbelievable. And that's what we ran into. And what got us was there was 1,000 people that had been taken off of that barge prior to it coming to us. And we took off over 3,800 people. on that barge.
I can't imagine. I remember Joshua. That's another reunion story, right? Because Joshua saw this picture that my father had taken in a lecture that wasn't even about this history. It was about something else. And he instantly recognized the barge, and he remembered being on that barge. And so he contacted me, and that's how we all got connected. But he described even the moments wherein that barge got connected, and the fence, the outer fence coming down because people were trying to clamor to get off the ship. It collapsed. He remembers this as a child. He remembers all of those events. But what I want to ask, actually, if I may, of John and Robbie, we've talked in previous conversations about some of these stories, and I'd love to hear you share this with this wider audience. Before I ask the question, I just want to preface what we were talking about earlier. The way that it has been described to me by these gentlemen and by others, it was utter chaos, right? This time period, all of the things that were happening. And we heard from Robbie and John about the training that they received. They were trained with fire suppression, trained with riot control, trained to provide security for the safeguarding and of the well-being and health of everybody that was on that ship, including the crew, as well as all the refugees. But what they were never trained to do, especially as 18-year-olds or 25-year-olds, was how do you deal with all of these sorts of circumstances? How do you deal with a kind of humanitarian crisis, right? And I don't want that to be lost. I'm sorry. I don't want that to be lost. That these young men, they had a mission. They were trained to do a specific thing. But the situation and the circumstances called for far more than that. And the amount of humanity that they showed, the courage, right? Under these I can't even imagine these extraordinary conditions, these circumstances that they faced, but also that all the refugees were facing. And there was obviously a language barrier. There were all kinds of cultural barriers. And you're being thrust into this situation to react. And there's no forward thinking. There's hardly any time to plan, but to just react. And I am amazed. I am amazed at what was accomplished and how those thousands of souls were rescued and eventually transported to Operation New Life. I know we'll get to New Life later on, and that resettlement process. But this was an extraordinary set of events. And I guess to go back, I mentioned at the outset of this that I had questions, right? I recall from our previous conversations what kinds of things they encountered and witnessed. So, John and Robbie, you had mentioned to me different things you saw that touched you, that you remember to this very day. And I wonder if you might share some of those experiences.
Well, like I said in the phone call, I mean, it's hard to express. And coming back to Okinawa, when things start sinking in, I say the best and worst of humanity because of things that happened on the ship. The Irwins, some of them were great. Some of them I'd throw over the side of that ship in a second. They laughed. They thought it was funny, us helping women and children and, elderly people up and down these cargo nets. That's dangerous enough in itself, going down, up and down by yourself. But when you're trying to keep someone from getting hurt, in a 2-story fall, and they think it's funny, I'm sitting there thinking, you're sitting up here in the shade. These people have lost their country. I can't even imagine how that would feel, and there's things you reflect on over time, and to see it firsthand as a kid, you're thinking, how do you even survive something like that? And I thought about that for 50 years until I met you, and then I see the fruits of what we did and know why we did it. You know, I guess you have questions your whole life because you don't know from the other side of the coin what happened.
But I do want to ask this question, Robbie, because you just brought it up, which is this. These experiences happen to these young men like you in the Marine Corps, and they also happen to these Vietnamese refugees. Somehow in my heart, I mean, I don't want to wish any of this experience on anybody, but I think America became a better country as a result of all this mixing of hardships. John, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I want to give you two incidents. I was down by the search platform, and Lance Corporal Edwards was close to me. Edwards was a character in itself, right, Robbie?
Mm-hmm.
But here comes an individual up. I am the former Minister of Interior for the former country of South Vietnam. Nam has his passport. Somehow it got misplaced, and I ended up with it for 50 years. But anyway, he wanted his stateroom. We are living on the outside in the weather, and he wants his stateroom. So we gave him his stateroom. I told Lance Corporal Edwards, please take the former Minister of Interior to the former South Vietnam Republic to his stateroom. So he put him in the bottom hold. Bottom hold is where the sewage ended up. Next, I had a little girl came up, and they were running the mine detector over, and it went off. Edwards came over and he said, Sergeant Irwin, something's wrong. I went over, we lifted her shirt. They had wrapped money belts around her full of wafers of gold. So I figured no family around. She just came up on her own. We put her on the search stand thinking that as her family came up, they would pick her up. I got busy. Things were going on around. I look up and she's gone. I figure, okay, her family came by. She's with her family. Everything's good. 2 days later, they bring her body up. We did not realize that the Oriental culture was that if you save someone's life, you become responsible for it. So the refugees wouldn't feed her. They wouldn't let her sleep with them. They wouldn't let her have water, and she passed out. I think she's dead, but the corpsman, thank God, they had one bag of ringers left. They brought her around. But I've got a daughter that's 3 years old, and the only thing I can think of, that could have been my daughter. That has haunted me for 50 years. In April, I dream about that little girl because I did not know enough to realize what was going on, but I got distracted. I've hated that all these years, but there was nothing I could do under the situation. We were a freighter. The normal contingent of a freighter, a World War II Liberty ship freighter, was 58, but that included the gun crews. We had no guns. So a peacetime contingent was 38. The ship's evaporator to make water, fresh water, was designed for a crew of 58. And we put on 4,755. Joshua Nugent remarked how the only thing he remembers on the barge, he was 8 years old, was being thirsty all the time. But when he got on the Kimbro, at least he could get water every now and then. We saw the suffering. We saw the babies crying, people watching their homeland go over the daggone horizon. They had lost everything. And there's nothing that we can do. We could feed them because we had a number of Vietnamese pilots that came on board that could speak enough English so that we could get our needs across. They formed work details. But we had to cook the rice because we couldn't let them on refugees into the internal portion of the ship because we didn't know who was who. We knew we had VC aboard. We knew we had third party elements that were there. We could not screen them out. So you didn't know if you were going to get your throat cut on watch. Then we end up with the problems with pink eye from the sanitary conditions.
But hold on, John. John, there's nobody who did any violence at all on the ship. You say there's VC reports, but did anything happen?
Not that I am aware of.
Yeah,
and I bring that question up. I bring that question up because when we think about letting Syrians into the United States, we think about people from the Middle East, we think about jihadists, terrorists. But there's a screening process. And I think that this conversation about VC on the ship, or we think about letting the Middle East people come into the United States, there's this sort of xenophobia. We're afraid of people who are from a different world than we are. But I think about the real implications of two different cultures, Americans, Vietnamese, Americans, Middle East. We're just all afraid of each other because we don't really know. And then until we get to know. And I think today, I want to bring this up in today's, climate, political climate. We are so afraid of the other people, right? We're just so, and it just feels like when I think about 50 years ago, when I think about all these U.S. Marines like you guys who are on the boat with these people, your experience of the United States and the generosity of the United States at the time must have been transformed very differently from what we're seeing today. Would any of you comment on that aspect?
Robbie, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, 50 years later, it's hard for me to compare. We watched the debacle in Afghanistan. It was horrible. It was, well, I guess comparatively, they're basically the same, two political wars. As Marines, you do your job. You don't have any choice in the matter who makes the decision, what the decision's made for. But I look back at how it happened with us, and like John said, we went up and down the coast and we anchored. Next thing we know, they're shelling Bung Tao, and they're trying to hightail it out of there in the ship before something bad happens. Same thing with all the helicopters going in and out during the actual evacuation of the embassy. They had gunships, fighter cover. At any minute, you're sitting on a ship wondering if one thing bad happens, we're already here. We're the first wave, because all this is going to cease and desist. And, we're going to be right back on the ground where my brother was in 1969. And so, from a political standpoint, I just look at everything in a time frame, and I'm frozen, I guess, to this. What's happening now? It's way too much politics for me. I'm getting to be an old man, and you just want to live out the rest of your life and not worry over such things. How do they vet people? Who knows? We couldn't vet them then. I mean, we went from on that ship to Grande Island. Everyone was offloaded. We took on a whole new load, sailed to Guam, offloaded there. Operation New Life started. There again, everybody goes through that system. How it's working now, I couldn't begin to tell you.
Could I jump in here? I there's something that I want to emphasize. This is based on what I've heard from various interviews and what I've read as well. And this goes back to that sort of fluid nature of what was happening. So John and Robbie and others were, as we mentioned, they were in charge of safeguarding everybody and their well-being on that ship. But this was such a fluid and chaotic time where there were so many people, and we're talking about thousands of people coming on board. Ken, I know what you're saying about, if were there actual reports? Do we know if there were any folks that were coming on that might have had bad intentions? Maybe not, but at the time, how would you know that, right? Especially if your mission is to protect. And my recollection of these stories is that there was even when that barge came, there were processes to bring people aboard, to screen them. But we have to think about how many people were involved in this process. You've got a couple dozen folks in the Marine detachment who are bringing on board hundreds, if not thousands of people. At any one point, if something happens, even if they're not armed, there's all kinds of consequences. And John, you had your hand up. I'll let you speak to that.
I'll give you an instance. Whenever the barge was tied up, we started unloading the barge, and then all of a sudden, this young man comes running up the gangplank. And he's shouting something. We don't know what it is. And I remember distinctly, I was up on the O2 level. I had my 12-gauge shotgun, wondering what in the world's going on. And I asked one of the staff sergeants, what's going on? He said, the kid says there's VC on board and they're going to blow up the barge. Well, if they blew the barge, it was going to sink. We're tied to the barge and it is huge. So we locked it down. Stopped taking refugees. We did not know that the kid was out of his head, whether he was out of his head because he was dehydrated or what. But for 18 hours, Robbie?
It was a long
Nothing moved. Nothing moved. We distributed ammo. We didn't have ammo until that happened. We went through the night. And these people are on that barge. They have been without food, water, sanitation for 3 days. Tied to the ship. They see that their ship has come in, so to speak. And we're not letting them on, and they don't know why. But we did not know. We had to be careful. Eventually, they brought in some grunts, and they did the initial screening down below. Now, one thing, the difference between now and then, Nam just told you his father would not have gotten on board the embassy compound or would not have gotten in there if he had not had the credentials. We turned a lot of people away at the embassy. So there was an initial screening. Not now. Whenever we open the borders, we don't ask, we just bring people in. Yeah, Robbie and I are old, but we've got grandkids. We wonder what kind of world are they going to live in. You've got sections in this country right now with Sharia law. This is unheard of. We have people dying from fentanyl. Whenever Robbie and I were young during this period, oh man, marijuana was bad. We hadn't even heard, you didn't even know how to spell cocaine. Life to us was a beer underage or maybe a drink of hard liquor.
Or two.
This experience, or what, Robbie?
Or two. 2 drinks of hard liquor, maybe two too many.
Well, are we talking about Boilermakers now?
Pretty much anything that came over the counter from the backside of that bar, in my eyes.
Since the experience on the Kimbro, how much do you all dwell and think about these memories?
They come back often. And like I said, when I first met Nam, every year from February, March, April, it's on your mind. You know, you wonder what we did, the things we did, how it ended. We never knew how it ended. And that has haunted me from the first, probably after I left the Corps. That's when I started thinking about it, you know, and it's like I told Nam and John, you know, it's something I didn't really talk about. I mean, who nobody experienced it like we did. So how do you even go, you know, this is how I feel? Well, hell, they don't know, you know, they have no clue. They weren't there. They didn't see the things that we saw, you know, the best.
Robbie, I can give you some closure about what happened to those people. A lot of them moved on to have very successful lives in the United States.
And that's made me proud. That's made me know that what I did, what we all did, was worthwhile for what all of us had to go through to get to today. You know, and it just took a long time. And when I just reached out to John about some awards to try to get my record right before I'm gone for my children, grandchildren, who, if anybody even gives a dang. And then he put me in touch with Nam. And then Joshua showed up, you know, and it's like, wow, this is awesome. You know, this is what I've waited for. I waited 50 years for this year. And it's been, you know, a little bit of a tough wait, but well worth it. Everything.
Yeah, a lot of them went on to become professors and PhDs and doctors and lawyers, and you know they've had really, really good lives, and their children have really good lives today as a result of their. I mean, now we can look back and say ancestors came on this big ship. I mean, that's really where things are right now.
Well, we have several. We have, like here, I live outside of Dallas-Fort Worth about an hour, but I grew up in several places, but there's 3 or 4 sizable Vietnamese communities, you know, Haltom City's one, one of the Irving's a big one. So I would see them from time to time. I worked all over the Metroplex, and, you know, but I don't know what nationality they are, but some of them I could tell were Vietnamese just by the language. But they have restaurants, they have grocery stores, doctors, they have law offices. So I guess I've known a little bit over the years, but to actually meet someone and speak to someone, especially someone that was with us, that's made a huge difference in my life. It really has. It's like the circle's complete now.
John, did you have something to say, John?
Well, yeah, lost my train of thought a little bit, but it's
not an age thing, is it?
Well, yeah, it's age. I'll write it off to that.
It might be.
That's what
being in the military. I stayed in the military and eventually retired. And the big difference between the Vietnam veterans that I knew, I couldn't express what I felt because we were proud of what we did. We wished that we could have done more. But these guys that have been in Kaesong, Con 10, what do you mean you felt sorry? It was a totally different experience. So you kind of kept to yourself. But I knew April. Whenever mid-April came around, it started. My wife will tell you I don't sleep in April. First wife will tell you the same thing. I don't sleep in April because those memories started coming back. The memory of the fisherman that was on that barge that I brought he and his son up. I mean, they're standing there, no suitcase. The only thing they've got is some threads on their back. And the other refugees were not letting them in line. So I sent a sentry down, got them, and brought them up here, and brought them up onto the Kimbro, and then took them and put them in a prime location at the aft section of the ship and stole a case of sea rats and gave it to them. You'd have thought I'd given them a bucket of gold. These things you remember. I mean, to me, it was a life-changing experience. Then the next thing I do is later on the Persian Gulf. I'm involved with that. Totally different experience, believe me. But yeah.
Now, did you have a question, Nam? Were you going to say something?
Well, no, I didn't, but I'll take this opportunity to ask. There were a couple of anecdotes that I heard from the both of you, John and Robbie, about other encounters on the Kimbro. There was the woman that I believe went overboard, mm-hmm. and there was also the story about this person that I've not met yet, but who was born on the ship. I'd love to hear you share those stories.
Yeah, John was more involved with the birth than I was. I was low man.
Whenever the ferry came on board, the ferry was the initial refugees that we received. They came on board, and we cut that ship away and started pulling off the coast of Vietnam. And this woman decided that she couldn't leave her country, so she jumped into the water. Staff Sergeant Glenn Hutch went into the water and pulled her out, but she had drowned. Whenever we got her up, we finally got a line over the side. We were able to bring her up. The corpsmen were trying to revive her, but she was passed. Her family gathered whenever we buried her at sea. They don't know what's going on. They know that she's dead. She's in a shroud. They put old parts in there so that it would sink. But what kind of service do you have? It's the first time I'd watched someone pass in front of me. Before, it was go to the funeral home, and there they are. They're embalmed. They look pretty doggone good. They go into the ground. But now I've got a body that's turning gray in front of me. It was a shock. What was the other event that you mentioned, man?
Birth.
Oh, the birth. After we brought them on board the ship, suddenly this gentleman comes up with a woman. She's obviously pregnant. And somehow he conveys that she's getting ready to give birth. And there's two other kids in tow. Well, Staff Sergeant or Master Sergeant Garland, which was our NCOIC, grabs the corpsman and said, "This woman's getting ready to give birth. Take her and do what you got to do." And he says, "What are you talking about? I've never birthed a baby." None of the corpsmen that we had with us had birthed a baby, but they've got combat experience. So they're scared. She's already had two, get ready to have a third. So myself, and I can't remember, I think it was Bill Struble, we're holding a blanket up while she's giving birth to give her a little bit of privacy. So she gives birth, and of course they named the child. Last name was Yun. He was a graphic artist and had done the mural in the Sailors Club in Saigon. So the sailors knew him on board the ship from previous voyages. So the child is named Yun M for Marine Kimbro. about 5 years ago, I decided, I wonder if I can find him on Facebook, because we found each other on Facebook. All of us, Robbie and Bill. I figured, okay, maybe I can find him. So I put in USNS Kimbro. Nothing comes up. So I go, well, maybe he Americanized his name, and I put in Kimbro M. Yun, graphic artist, Miami, Florida. Now, when he was born, I gave his family $20. I had $20 to my name, and I figured they needed a little bit of American money. So I gave my address and a $20 bill. A year later, I get a picture of his first year birthday. I got a picture of USNS Kimbro, 1 year old. So when his birthday came up, which happened to be, I believe, the 29th of April, the day the shit hit the fan, I sent him an email with an attachment of this picture. And I said, happy birthday. So he comes back to me and he said, who are you and how the hell did you get my first birthday picture? So I went back to him and I said, well, son, I was there when you were born. So that's a good and a bad.
Wow, what a great story, John.
Yeah, it was amazing time. It really was.
The greatest story is meeting the Nam coming in out of the blue 50 years to the week that he came on board to Kimbro. My wife and I looked at each other and said, this is God doing this, because how out of 8,000 people that we eventually brought out of Vietnam onto Kimbro, we have someone the week that they came on board. And then Joshua was 8 years old on that barge. And we meet him. Joshua, chemical engineer with DuPont, responsible for new construction all over the world for DuPont. A great success story. And we're looking back and saying, this is God coming in this late stage of my life and showing me that my life did have purpose. I brought some good into this work.
Joshua,
meeting you.
Joshua has memories from elders and himself. I spoke to him for well over an hour on the phone, and he was a sharp 8-year-old,
Yeah.
So he still has more in him than we do at our age now. And I was amazed at the conversation, because he had his uncle, he had his parents. So he had a bunch of people on that ship with us that he's conversed with throughout his life about things that happened. And it was a great I want to meet him in face to face so bad. I can't stand it. It's a 5-hour drive. I'm just going to have to get myself up and go one day. But yeah, it's amazing to talk to people. I've looked and looked and looked and tried to find others that were there with us, and I just can't. I don't have the internet knowledge.
Is there a Facebook group that's USS Kimbro dedicated?
No, but there is a one for Operation Frequent Wind, Operation Mayaguez, because you got to remember that after we got back to Okinawa, Mayaguez went down. So we got the triple whammy. We got Operation Eagle Pull, Operation Frequent Wind, and then the Mayaguez incident right there. So it was a rough time in the 3rd Marine Division.
We're going to wrap up in a little bit, but I do have this question about what would you say to future Americans who face situations like the evacuation in Vietnam, Afghanistan, the young Marines that are facing that future in the next few years? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's that's a tough question to answer for me. I mean, I did 4 years and some time, a little bit of extra time. I did 2 tours in Okinawa because I loved it over there. I mean, I think I expressed to Nam in our conversation before that we win as a unit, but you're a bunch of brothers and you look out for each other. You have each other's back, no matter what, no matter how tired you are, how physically beat down you are, you're there for them. You'll do anything to keep them safe. And you go on missions like that. I mean, from a danger standpoint, I mean, I never was terrified, but you didn't have time to be anyways. It was just, it was basically 24/7 for a couple of weeks and then it was over. And, thank goodness everybody came home in one piece. And, it's hard to say what to tell them other than, the brotherhood just like we do. And that's what you're there for. Everything else to me was out the window. I could have gave a damn about anybody except the guys that were with me on that ship. And I know when they got into a situation like that, I'm sure they would all feel the same. No matter what your personal feelings are towards one another, you have each other's back no matter what, because everybody wants to come home.
My last 5 years of working life, I was a government employee. I trained the Marines that were going to Iraq and Afghanistan with the new communications equipment before they went over. And I would tell them at the end that, looking back, realizing I have more of my life behind me than in front of me, one thing that I've come to realize, you could say it's for God, country, but whenever you get into it, it's for that Marine that's beside you. You don't want to fail him. He doesn't want to fail you. It's the brotherhood that is instilled in us at San Diego, Parris Island, or Quantico. It's that pride. You don't want to fail because that Marine is going to see you beside you. So you keep on doing things that ordinarily you wouldn't do. One thing that Robbie didn't bring up, we were so damn tired. We couldn't be afraid. We were putting one foot in front of the other. Our workday was 20 hours. We were going for 20 hours, and in the 4 hours that we had as a break, that was when we slept, and we had to clean our weapons. So you'd clean your weapon, get it oiled up so it wouldn't be a rust bucket in the morning, try to get some sleep. But if we weren't on guard, we were feeding, getting water out. It was just one thing after another. Whenever we started receiving refugees after Saigon fell, we were 30 hours straight, no break, in the hot sun. That was whenever the kid came up on the barge, said there was BC on board. I don't know about Robbie, but my sphincter got so daggone tight you couldn't driven a nail up it with a 20-pound sledgehammer. Well, didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, and I told you and Nam, that was the first time I ever loaded a weapon and pointed it at a human. I mean,
same here.
Emotions just rush through you because you're laying there on a rope port, loaded weapon at 18 years old, pointed at humans. You don't know them. You don't know their intentions. But all we knew is what that kid was telling us. We were whooped by the time that was over. It was hot. It was miserable. And then it went on into the night until the 4th Marines, they sent a quick reaction force to get everything back under control on the barge that was tied up to us. But yeah, that's what I mean. It was an emotional time, you reflect back on it more and more and more, and you know, I remember things like, we'd give the sea rations, we'd save our crackers and peanut butter and jelly and, and give it to the kids, and they were
Candy.
Candy. They'd be doing backflips,
chewing gum. I'd never seen chewing gum before.
Yeah. That's the stuff that, it sticks with you, I mean, it was fun to watch. They had some entertainment to break up what was really happening and how bad it really was, because they had no clue. They were just 3 and 4 threes.
I want to thank both of you for your service during those years and for the years following. From a Vietnamese American kid myself, I often think about all the servicemen that helped the Vietnamese people. So from my heart to both of you, thank you for your service. And now I don't know if you have any closing questions or statements, but please have it.
I hear the chiming of the grandfather clock in somebody's background.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I want to go back to a comment that was made earlier about, how every year in that time period from around, February onward into April, you have these sleepless nights, you have these memories come back, and how that's kind of coupled with the fact that even afterwards, in the years after 1975, it was hard to talk about these experiences with people because they just didn't live through them. They didn't understand them, right? They had totally different perceptions about the war, about what happened after the war, all of that. And it strikes me because, my parents, they lived through this experience, and all of these folks who fled lived through the experience, and it was from a different perspective. Their trauma was from a different perspective, but we were all there, right? We all intersected, our lives intersected in these very complex ways. And I know that they continue to live through these memories as well. These experiences don't go away. There are different conversations, different moments that haunt them in the years since then. But to me, what I find, as tragic as all of this has been, what I find sort of it's sort of hopeful, right? And it's powerful and meaningful is how our lives did connect, not only in 1975, but continue to be intertwined in the succeeding generations. And I don't mean just through today. I mean moving into the future, because I have kids. My parents have their grandchildren. We're going to have successive generations in the United States as well. And they're going to continue to be intertwined with the generations that come after all of us. And it all comes back to that central history, that epicenter related to the exodus out of Saigon and also other parts of Southeast Asia, related to Guam, related to all of these threads. I'm amazed by how we can be connected. And like Ken was saying just a few minutes ago, my heart is filled with gratitude for everything that was done for us to allow this to be a reality. It's not just for me, right? It's not just for my parents, but it's for all successive generations coming. So I just want to express that sentiment, and to say that the stories that you have told and continue to tell, it's not just you, but everybody else that was connected, all the volunteers, all the other service personnel, and all the refugees, the thousands and thousands of refugees. We are just scratching the surface with what we know and how we're connected. And this was just based on, a few months of internet research and conversations on Zoom. I imagine if we put that shovel and start digging deeper in the ground, how much more are we going to find? How many more people are going to get connected to one another, whether they're still living or not, right? So that's what gives me hope as well. John, you have your hand up.
One thing that you've got to remember, gentlemen, when Robbie and I came back, we were baby killers. You didn't As a drill instructor at Parris Island, 1976, I had to tell the recruit platoons after graduation or whatever they got base liberty, go buy civilian clothes so that you could change at the airport. You didn't go in uniform. So we kept it to ourselves. Our haircuts gave us away, but we didn't point it out because society looked at us and that lump, baby killing, daggone Vietnam frame of mind. That was the hard part. We knew that we had done a humanitarian service, but it's a different world now, gentlemen, than it was back in.
I was glad to see the kids come out of the Gulf and be praised.
Amen.
That's I think one of my buddies lives in Arkansas. I speak to him a few times a year, and he bought a Harley and bought him a Marine Corps shirt and said he rode down to the store on his new Harley and got off, and some guy walked up and said, "Thank you." He said, I stared at him for about 10 seconds and said, "For what?" He goes, "Your service." He goes, "In 40-something years, nobody's ever said thank you." He goes, "I didn't know how to respond." I said,
If I could give you one more. I had a sergeant major in the headquarters battery or headquarters squadron that I was in before I retired. The sergeant major was a young PFC whenever he came out of Vietnam. They got to Chicago and they were watching the body of a fallen come off a plane. So all the military personnel coming back from Vietnam lined up, rendered a salute. He felt something hit him. He didn't know what it was. After they had done their little ceremony, he looked. He had been hit with a bag of dog manure. He went to the airport. According to him, and this is his story, not mine, he went to the airport bar and he started drinking. He was still drinking. He was a drunk, but a sergeant major. At night, he was drinking, but he was straight during duty hours until he watched the parade after the Persian Gulf War. He never took another drink, married a young lady with 2 children, and I hope to God he's doing well right now. But that was part of the effect of what was going on in this nation. 22 a day.
Yeah, every day.
Thank you for the opportunity, both of you. Nam, Kenneth, God bless you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Robbie.
Let's tell our story.
Nom, thank you for inviting me into this. It's been a blessing. Like you say, the memory, everything's tattooed in me somewhere. It's just finding it out, but it's good to speak. It's good to speak with you and Ken and see the other side of what we did. It's really made my life better. So thank y'all very much. And thank you for your service, Ken.
Thank you all for opening up today.
Semper Fi, Kenneth.
Semper Fi, hoorah.
Semper Fi.
It's a privilege. This has been a privilege. Just being reconnected with you guys and being able to share these stories. These are stories that have to be told and they have to be remembered. So I'm very, very happy that Ken invited us on to do this and to record these memories, because that history, I mean, there are aspects of that history that are known, but there are so many that are just unknown to the mainstream society. And they need to be known.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nam. Thanks for bringing it all together.
Ship.
Godspeed. Semper Fi.
Very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. Special thanks to Brittany Tran, to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast.